Imagine waking up every single night in pain. Even the small things, those things that should be simple, like turning over in bed, feel impossible. That was me 10 years ago, 2015. At the time, I was going through a tough time, physically and emotionally. Pain was my day-to-day, mornings were the worst, but I'm quite stubborn, and I kept ignoring it for a long time. I thought to myself, it's just regular pain from running. Maybe it's pain because of the weight that I've put on. So I suffered in silence for a long time. Luckily, my wife is even more stubborn than I am. She's always right, by the way. And she told me that I needed to go to a doctor because I was ignoring that for a long time. So I went to take some exams, and eventually, a few weeks later, I was in one of those doctor offices where you have an uncomfortable chair and you can see a ton of posters of spines. And the doctor was looking to my results. And finally, he looked me in the eye and told me two words that from day on would define me. Two words that would become my identity, that would be part of me. Two words that I've never heard before: ankylosing spondylitis. And then he explained that ankylosing spondylitis is an autoimmune chronic disease. What does that mean? It means that the same system that we have in our body to help us out fighting the bad guys, on my own case, is attacking itself. So my body is attacking itself every single day, depending on the things that I feed into that body. So he kept going, and he recommended that I need to change some things. Mostly, I have to stop running and stop playing football, two things that I love to do. Besides that, medication and physiotherapy, just that. But then, before leaving the room, he made sure that I would get one important message. And this is that moment when you are having a conversation with the doctor and you feel that there's something really important coming, because you can see in the eyes that there's an important message. And basically, he said that if at any day I look into the mirror and I can see that I have a red eye, I need to rush to the hospital. Because with ankylosing spondylitis, blindness is a possibility. That's really scary, let me be honest. And that's probably the thing that made me react to that disease. That was the moment where I realized that I had to change something, that I couldn't keep going that way. It wouldn't be sustainable. I don't want to live in fear. So, obviously, I started applying every single thing he was recommending to me. I tried to do all of those changes, like stopping playing football. I've never played football again. I stopped running. I changed all of that. I took the meds. I went to physiotherapy. But even then, I could feel the pain there. I was just masking it. It was still there. So I had to do something. And during that journey, I became aware of these practices of mindfulness, minimalism, those type of things. And I started trying to be more mindful and more intentional on the choices that I had on my life. So I observed my own system. I tried to understand the different inputs that were triggering pain, that were causing that pain. And it was during that process that I came to the conclusion that more often than not, that pain was coming from stress and anxiety. So I had to control those. But during the journey, I came to the conclusion that that stress, that anxiety, more often than not, would come from the same place: writing code for living, living and breathing technology, having to deal with the culture of organizations, the dynamics of teams. All of those things had an impact on myself. I was feeling it in my body. But the interesting part is that our industry is also a system that has been attacking itself. It's a system that is feeding himself the same things over and over again, recurring bugs, Meetings over meetings without one single action that you can take out of it. Deadlines that seem impossible. A huge turnover in organizations, not because the other company is more attractive, because more often than not, we get to a limit where we say to ourselves, I'm about to burn out, I need to find another thing. This is the system that we have been building. And I believe that all these lessons that I had to learn to master my own disease, all of those lessons that I had to learn to focus on myself and understand what is happening, they can be quite useful for the software industry because I've been applying that not only personally, but also professionally. And I would love to come here with a recipe on how to simplify your systems, on how to simplify your profession, but there's no recipe, okay? Bad news. The only thing that I can share with you is a set of stories that we can extract some ideas, some behavioral change, some small things that you can do in the day-to-day to be more aware of what is happening, small techniques that you can get from them. So finding those small things that you can do in the day-to-day to behave differently in your day-to-day. And it all starts with something simple. It starts with the idea of focus. I had to focus on my own body to understand what was happening. It starts with subtraction, removing the things that you come to the conclusion they are just leading to pain. And mastery, mastering the things that you do in your day-to-day, mastering the ones that stay there after you focus and after you subtract. And I will talk about those three pillars, but first we need to clarify something. When we talk about simplicity, many of us use that term interchangeably with easy. But easy is a completely different thing. So let's start with simple. We have complex. Complex is something that is interconnected, is intertwined, is coupled. Okay? We know those terms from our day-to-day. So the opposite is simple. Simple is something that is clear. I can reason about it. I can easily understand what is happening. I can clearly look at it and see, oh, this is quite transparent. I can explain this to someone quite easily. But easy is something extremely different. Example, my daughter, she's here, she's 9, and she plays the violin. She has been playing the violin for a couple of years. Obviously, for a child, it's quite hard to play the violin, so she's learning. The musics that she plays nowadays are a bit more advanced than the ones that she started. But if you assign those musics, so a professional musician that knows how to play the violin to play them, they will be so easy. For her, they are a bit harder. For me, they are impossible. Easy is this idea of something that is at hand, something that is accessible, something that we are familiar with, something that we can do without a ton of friction. We are so familiar with it that we go with it. For us, writing code is just day-to-day. Writing an hello world is just playing, just a few seconds. For some people that never have written a line of code in their life, is science fiction. That's easy. That's what easy means. It's not related to simple. Simple is something so different. And that leads to the conclusion that, in fact, easy is quite subjective. Between this huge group, we have so many different languages. My native language, that is Portuguese, is easy for me. If you don't speak Portuguese, good luck, right? So it's quite subjective. I don't mean that when we try to do something simple, it will need to be easy during the path. Okay? That's the common misconception. The best example that I like to use for this is a recipe. If I come here and I present a cooking recipe, there's several steps, but the recipe is simple. Just a list of steps, and then you need a set of ingredients, just that. However, if one of those steps is an advanced technique that only seasoned chefs master, now my recipe isn't easy, it's hard. But for them, it's supposed to be easy. So we don't need to strive for every single thing be easy in order to be simple. We are trying something completely different. And why that matters? Because the problem is that we have the natural tendency of always relying on the easy. It's quite easy to always follow the thing that you are familiar with. It's always easy to avoid the discussions, to avoid the conversations, to avoid the design moment, to avoid the thinking phase, to avoid the challenges. Because we want to get there faster. So we'll use the things that don't offer resistance. However, if you decide to choose simple, you will start fighting in the day-to-day. You will take time to design. You will take time to go through the challenges and learn something out of it. And by the end, it will be better because it compounds. Over time, you can see the speed going up. This is what you see in most projects. They start like this. Eventually, every single thing slows down. After a few years working on the same thing over and over again, it's almost impossible to change a line of code. If you choose simple, that's what I came here to share with you, things can be different. Let me use another example. I'm Portuguese. Portuguese is my native language. I learned English at school, but as you can see, for sure, it's not perfect. I'm aware of that. And I've been having classes during the past few years, trying to get to a different level. And during that process, I came to the conclusion that even English, that is one of those languages that we perceive as simple, there's a ton of hard things inside, things that are complex enough to be hard to take the next step. For example, only recently I realized that I can use exactly the same word with two different pronunciations, and it means two different things. That's complexity that is part of the language. Record or record, exactly the same word, two different meanings, two different pronunciations. So we are not here to avoid complexity. We can't do that, okay? We deal with it. It's our profession. It's the thing that we do in our day-to-day. The problem is the bias that we have, the addiction that we have to complexity. We live in an industry that is completely addicted to it. Okay? We strive for it. We value it. We applaud those that have a complex system. We are proud. We put it on our CV, resume-driven development. Okay? We are so happy with it. But eventually, it backfires. There's some complexity that will always be there. That is the essential one. The one that is part of our job. The one that we have to do it because it's the thing that we have been hired to do. But then there's the rest. The accidental one. But this, in fact, is an onion with many different layers. And the worst of them is that one that is self-inflicted. The one that we force ourselves to do. The one that we force ourselves to have there. Why that happens? Because of our curiosity. Because we want to do the latest and greatest. Because we want to choose the easy path. Because we don't want to have those boring discussions or trying to find a better answer for the things that we need to do. That will self-inflict complexity. Complexity that then we need to deal with it. The essential, we need to control it. The rest, we need to try to avoid it. There will always be complexity there, but we need to try to avoid it. Why should you care? According to a study with developers from different countries, 30% of us have a diagnosed mental disorder. That means that in this conference, roughly 100 of us have a diagnosed mental disorder. That's why we need to do something. That's why we need to change something. Because this is getting worse. Because nowadays, many of us are afraid of what is coming. We are afraid of being replaced by AI, by dealing with all the news. Every single thing is always changing. That's why we need to care. And it also all starts with focus. Focus is the first step for a simple reason. It's the step where you look inside, you are intentional, you observe, you try to notice what is happening, before reacting. But also is the step where you understand what you are doing in your day-to-day. Is the step where you have a clear idea of where you are heading to. That's the example of what happened at WhatsApp. There was a point in history, 2014, where WhatsApp had 50 engineers to handle 900 million users. How is that possible? How is that possible? That's possible because they had the focus on the mission. They had a clear vision of why they existed. They were so focused on delivering the best possible experience for communication, end-to-end communication, that were just concerned about that. And we know for a fact that if the software isn't simple, it can't be reliable. If the software isn't simple, how can we trust it? And when you are building a platform that will put all of those millions of users talking with each other, having phone calls and all of that, you need simplicity in place. But the most important part is having a clear vision of why you exist, why that company exists, why that software exists, why that feature matters, why that action that you are taking is important, why that meeting still exists. This is the most important part. Because if you don't have that, you don't have focus. You don't know what is happening. We tend to start in the other way around. We are always starting with an idea in mind of what we want to do, and then we go to our favorite step, that is, OK, I need to do this. Which technologies can I use? Which design patterns? Okay? So we jump to the how. Eventually, when we get to the why, we try to retrofit an excuse to do it. This is the Golden Circle by Simon Sinek, and is an excellent tool to use in the day-to-day for every single action that you take, any single change that you do in your system. Start with why, asking those types of questions. A perfect example of this is Amazon. Amazon is well known by the focus on making the clients happy. Besides this week, when every single thing was down, I think you were aware of that. So Amazon, in 1997, they had this idea of trying to make shopping as simple as possible. Okay? It should be so simple that with a single click, you can buy something. In 1997. At the time, this looked like science fiction. No one was doing this. So they started that challenge. Jeff Bezos challenged a group of engineers to try to do it. So they went and tried to design it. But they come back to Bezos showing a version where, in fact, you would click a button to buy something, but then you would have a confirmation step. And on that confirmation step, you would need to basically say, yes, that's my payment method. That's the address that I want to deliver. And that looked like a good idea for a simple reason. What if something goes wrong and the user misclicks it? What if a child goes to that page and orders 10 Lego sets at once? We need to have something to deal with it. It's reasonable. Okay? It's a good idea. It's engineers thinking they work that way. They got back to Bezos, and Bezos just answered with a single question. What's the part of with just one click we don't understand? That's a hard question. But it was more than enough for them to go back to the drawing board and finding a solution that is the one that they still use today that makes this experience possible, without impacting the clients, having still a way to cancel that order. But that requires a challenge. That requires someone to ask the difficult questions. What that required was a clear vision of a goal, a clear idea of where we are heading to, what we want to achieve. They knew they wanted an experience so simple that you could do it with a single click. They wanted to remove all the friction. But also, they had a clear vision of what was impossible, the anti-goals, the things that wouldn't be accepted. They wouldn't accept more than one click, or the client being able to cancel or change the payment method. That was out of the scope. So I challenge you to, in your day-to-day, when you define goals, OKRs, KPRs, all of those things, start thinking about the anti-goals, the things that you will not be working to achieve those goals. Why does that matter? Have you noticed that sometimes we start with that goal of, let's support 500 million users? And everyone is so excited because finally I can start applying all my knowledge about achieving 99.99% uptime. But maybe that was not the goal. We want to achieve that scale, but that might not be the goal. OK, we want to scale this, but this year is not the year that we become a platform. Having those well-defined can bring focus to everyone. You understand what's the mission at the moment, what's the thing that you are trying to achieve, and you don't waste energy going on the other way. Okay? That's why. Also, we can achieve that by doing the same thing that Bezos has done, asking the hard questions, the questions that no one wants to ask, the questions that we are afraid of asking. Is there a simpler way to do this? Can we avoid doing this? Can we remove all of those components? Can we do this with a small set of features? Can we deliver this in 2 weeks? If you are the one starting to ask those questions, you might get to the conclusion that no, you can't do it. But at least you challenge the assumptions. You are the one that is capable of creating a discussion that creates value, that enables the team to find opportunities for improvement. We are always so concerned that all of the things that we do in software development, they will be there forever. We are always so concerned that once we go through that door, there's no turning back. We are always thinking that that thing that you are working now will be used in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. What if, instead, we look into every single decision as a two-way door, as something that you can go in, you realize, no, this was not the path, let me go back. For that, we need to be fast. For that, we need to take the risk, but we need to start with something simple. We need to take those simple decisions that allow us to roll back, to test the waters, to understand if we are going the correct path. There will be some that are one-way doors for sure. Regulation, for example, there's no turning back. But for many of the things that we do in our day-to-day, 10 years is a long time. Maybe we can start thinking about 2 weeks. Let's try this in 2 weeks. There's always the chance of going back. We can't be afraid of this sunk cost fallacy that make us be afraid of wasting time, of wasting something. That's a problem. I would love to challenge you for a small exercise. Looking into this small Lego construction, that is something like this, okay, it's not level up, right, sideways. What's the first idea that comes to mind if I ask to level that construction? Just capture that thought that comes to mind. What's the first thing you will try to do to level that? There's a book named Subtract, where the author picked these small experiments and went through multiple groups of grown-ups, and they came to the conclusion that most of us will add a Lego block to the one that is in the bottom, so it's level up. What if we subtracted from the other one? It's a small thought, but it's something that we usually don't do. And it's one small thought that leads to simplification. The structure now is simpler, is lighter, is easier to manage. But by the simple fact that we are so used to solve problems by adding blocks, we never think about that. It's not an option for us. When we think about a problem, the first reaction is, what can I have to address this? The interesting fact is that once he tried to run exactly the same study with a group of kids, the results were the reverse. So they naturally lean into removing one of the blocks. This says something about the way that we grow up, the way that we are taught to solve problems. We always think that we need to grab a tool to address an issue. So that's the way that we work in our day-to-day. And that's one of the challenges that we need to face. We need to accept that subtraction, more often than not, is a great tool to address a problem. Subtraction is not only a tool to address a problem, is a possible tool to address a problem, but also is a solution that can simplify everything, remove complexity. And why does that is useful? For a simple reason. According to a study by Bain & Company, they serve a group of CEOs from unperforming companies, those companies that are supposed to be growing quite fast, but they are not performing as expected. And according to the study, 85% of the CEOs of those companies will blame not the competitors, they will not blame the market conditions, a market crash, a technology, or even the clients. What they blame is the internal complexity. And what creates that internal complexity is the simple fact that when we think about growing, we think about the process of going from here to here, we always think about adding things on top. A bigger team, more technology, more processes, governance, more meetings. We are always adding things on top of things. So at some point, we stop using that founder's mentality that took us there, the same mentality that Steve Jobs used once he got back to Apple to rescue Apple from bankruptcy. The only thing that he has done on that moment was understanding that in some moments, in the day-to-day of a company, in our life, it's important to know why do we exist. Is it to deliver the best experience to our clients? So that's our goal. How can we focus on that instead of being so concerned about doing the same thing as the others are doing? So he applied that founder's mentality to reduce the product line in 70%. He reduced the product line to something as simple as this, 4 products. Why? Because now they could have the focus on the product line that they have in hands, and they could make it better. They wouldn't waste time working on products that they were not even capable of explaining why you should buy them. That's founder's mentality. That's this idea of focus, of laser focus of why something matters. But we don't do that in our day-to-day. We tend to ignore that for a long time. This is basically the 80-20 principle, the Pareto principle. The principle that says that 20% of our efforts will lead to 80% of the results, but we are wasting 80% of our effort because it only drives 20% of the results. For sure, you have worked on features in your day-to-day, in projects, that by the end, no one was using them. They were used once in a while. They were abandoned. What if we were mindful, we were more intentional, and we tried to avoid those? We tried to go through a two-way door and quickly test that and allow the possibility of subtracting some of those things, avoiding those things. It's quite important to say no more often, because a no today can enable the possibility of saying a yes tomorrow, a yes that is more important than the no from today. When we have so many things in our plates, it's hard to find room for new opportunities. But when you start saying no, you can subtract many of those that will remove all the time. This requires a different mindset when building software, a mindset that is not present in our companies in the day-to-day. But it's possible to create that mindset, that culture. The perfect example is the X company, not X by Twitter or Elon Musk, X by Google. Google has a company named X that they call it the Moonshot Factory. It's the place where they try those sci-fi ideas like self-driving cars. Any type of project that looks the future will go to this company. Since it's technology that doesn't exist, the risk is so high, anything can go wrong. We don't have the proof that this will work. So they created a culture where failing, where saying, hey, I think this is not working, is acceptable. A culture where the leader of a project, if he steps up into a conference for the whole organization, an all-hands meeting, and say, I believe we should abort this initiative, everyone will clap. He might get a bonus. On that moment, he's driving revenue to the company by avoiding wasting a ton of money and only finding that 10 years after. But this requires this mindset shift, this allowing this possibility of saying, no, we are not doing that. Okay, that's not working. that we failed. We always say, fail fast, accept failure. It's important to fail. No one wants to do it. But that's so important to simplify. And why we don't do it? Because we have created this idea inside software development that we need to always be moving forward. We need energy. That's why we are always sprinting every 2 weeks, right? We believe that we can always be in our best performance as possible, getting fast to the finish line. We believe that by the simple fact that the sprint takes only 2 weeks, we can always be sprinting. But in fact, it's that this process is slowing us down. Why? That velocity, that energy that you can feel of everyone trying to achieve the goal every 2 weeks, in fact, is a waste of energy, is anxiety, is pressure. And one thing interesting about anxiety and pressure and stress is that it narrows your thinking. You don't reason about the challenges in the same way. What if, instead, we took some time to have a more calm environment? We created the conditions by simplifying that gives us space to think about what we need to do, to reason about the challenges, to try to find creative ways to deal with those. What if we do that? And many think that the simple idea of going slow in a calm way is just lack of ambition. I would say it's sustainability. It's understanding that we are building something in the long run, not something for tomorrow. There will be moments where you need to sprint, but sprinting every single day wouldn't be a great idea. For some reason, during the marathon, they don't fire the pistol every 200 meters, right? Okay? They know where they are heading to. They know that they need to control the pace. Okay? They know there will be challenges in some moments, but they keep running with that in mind. This starts with us. I have many conversations with colleagues and friends that everyone has this attitude like, it's the way that we work, it's the way that this company works, it's the culture of the company. But the culture of the companies is created by the people that work on those companies. We are those people. And sometimes it just takes one person being the person that steps up and starts asking the difficult questions like, what can we remove? Can we cancel this project? Can we avoid doing that feature before we are pretty sure of doing that? Can we remove those 30 dependencies that we just installed? Can we do this with the existing stack that we have instead of bringing something else? We need to start asking those questions. If you can't do it in the day-to-day, there's one small thing you can take home today and start doing it, a spring cleaning. There's this term that is the kipple. Kipple is all of those useless objects that keep accumulating and spreading. Those things that lay around and are just dragging you. Okay? They are waste. But you have them there, laying around, and you believe that by the fact that you don't look at them and you don't face them, they are not a big deal. In software development, they are always there. It's meetings that have been important in the past, but they keep happening without no good reason. Is all of those configurations that no one takes advantage of them anymore, all of those outdated documents, all of those lines of code that are still commented, all of those initiatives that someone started to, for example, let's do a weekly meeting to find opportunities for improvement, but no one cares anymore. Those things are kipple. And if at least once a year you face those challenges, you ask yourself, can I throw this away? What's the value here? Why this exists? If you focus on that and you accept that you can subtract, you can simplify. And why do we care about simplifying? Because once we focus on what matters, once we remove things, we will find space to master the things that we do. Mastery is one of those aspects of software engineer that I feel that we have been losing touch with it. The idea of a craft, or something that we value, but we try to go deep into why do we do it. We try to express our love on technology in the details, in the small things. We have been losing that part in the past few years with the speed, with new technologies, with always going from here to there. The masters of mastery, they know it's different. They know it's not a question of doing more. The perfect example is Jiro Ono. Jiro is a 99-year-old sushi master, sushi chef in Japan. He's turning 100 next week. He still works every day. He has 3 Michelin stars, and the way that he expresses his love for his profession is that he says that his mission, the goal that he has in life, is to keep perfecting this art. So by the end, he can transmit all of that knowledge to the people that work with him, his kids, for example. And he realized that the secret of great sushi is not the extra ingredients, is not all of those extra flavors that are being combined, is the simplicity of the process. Is finding great ingredients and respecting them. Is using the proper techniques. Is mastering the techniques to make those ingredients shine. Having more is just bringing complexity. It's just a layer, is makeup. Okay? It's just removing the essence of everything. But that's the way that we tend to approach software. With more, we believe it's better. What if it was the other way around? For example, if I came here and I challenged everyone to go through a process of building this system, a system to support 30 million users and 4 million images uploaded per day. How many people do you need to build such a system? Which technology stack? Many might think about hundreds of developers and the latest and greatest in terms of technology, Kubernetes, DynamoDB, stuff like that. What if I told you that that was the scale of Instagram when Facebook bought Instagram? They only have a team with 13 people. The surprise is that only 6 of them were engineers. So it's possible to build something great with less if you take the proper decisions. If you focus on the mission of what you're trying to achieve, you don't accept doing more than that. You will fight for that. You are courage enough to say no so you can say yes to the proper opportunities. And you accept that you will subtract, and you will try to master the things that you use. Because instead of going after all the latest and greatest, what they have done is that with a tiny little team, they used simple technology. Django, that is Python, RabbitMQ, and Postgres. But the difference is that they took it to the limit. They studied it, they perfected it, they tried to make the best out of it. That is something that we tend to avoid. We need to get this love for the boring technology again, in my opinion. Technology like SQLite is heavily used in the world. No one cares about it. Technology like Nginx is 21 years old, and we are still using it. But we go online, we find an example on how to use it, and it's just that. What if we took the extra step? What if we tried to master it? Maybe the next time that you are looking for a solution by looking to a new range of stacks, by trying to bring something new, maybe you can take that boring technology to an extra step. I don't mean that we need to ignore what Netflix is doing, okay? There's places where this might be important. There's SLOs, there's, for example, regulation sometime, and you might want to achieve something like this. But believing every single time that we are Netflix leads to a ton of complexity. We can do more with less. This is the culture that we have been creating, to a point that nowadays CNCF, the Cloud Native Foundation, has a huge landscape that you need to scroll to go through all of those entries inside of the catalog. The funny part is that each entry has an option to zoom in, and the thing that I find quite interesting is that we are so obsessed on mastering all the technologies, of having a good idea of what each one of them can do, that they had the need to create this small option here on the top that is a quiz. So you can take a quiz to test your knowledge about those thousands of technologies. This happens because we are addicted to this complexity of always using the latest and greatest. That's the reason. What if instead we created a cap, a limit to innovation? Sounds strange. But if we create a cap, if we assign, for example, to each team member an innovation token, something that they need to exchange to bring something new, something that they need to exchange to do a major rewrite. And each team member has one token, each type of change might have a different price, and now negotiate. That will lead the team to find a better solution, an optimal solution with the tools that they have. Instead of going after every single thing, they need to fight for it. Okay? They need to argue for it. So it's not just because yesterday I went to NDC Porto and I saw a great workshop on how to use this technology, so now I want to use it. It needs to be something else. It needs to be something more. Fight for it, argue for it, and explain why it matters. And why it's important to have something like this. Because by having a cap, that enables the team to keep learning, to keep adopting new things, things that in fact solve problems, while they keep mastering the ones that still exist. They will have to ask themselves, can I do this thing that the new technology is promising with the technology that I have? That doesn't mean that sometimes you can't allow the team to overflow the limits, but having that as a tool is something that I challenge you to apply, because it makes the difference. And we need to start to be proud of the things that we do. For example, we see this trend with microservices and distributed applications and all of that, because we want to be proud of the things that we do. We put all of that complexity in our CVs, right? So we do microservices, because Netflix does it. The big companies do it. What if we were proud of the things that we have in place, and we try to make them better? That's the example of Basecamp. Basecamp talks openly on their blog, on conferences, and all of that, about their majestic monolith, is how they call it. They are so proud of it, but that doesn't mean that they stop learning with what's new, what's the latest and greatest. What they have done is that they try to learn what is new. They try to learn what to bring from the other ones. And now they call it a citadel. Why? They realize that this idea of having a different service running with a different language sometimes makes a ton of sense. Why trying to put Ruby on Rails doing something that Go would be a better language? So they create those tiny little services when they have a really good reason for it. But they don't do it every single time. Because they know what is important. They know why they exist. They are focused on the mission. They are not distracted by the cargo codes, the latest and greatest, the hype-driven development. They know the mission. They try to take the best out of the things that they do. We need to start doing more of that. For example, Elon Musk, when he created SpaceX, instead of looking into the rocket industry and trying to understand what can we do, exactly the same thing, but what can we put on top? What's the extra things that our rockets can have in order to achieve our mission? No, the process was different. Let's get back to the basics. What is there inside of the rocket that shouldn't be there in the first place? Because we tend to optimize the things that shouldn't exist in the first place. That's the truth. We tend to optimize the things that maybe we could subtract them. We try to master the things that maybe we don't need them. And we should know this because this industry already told us that the principles will always stay with us. But the frameworks come and go. In the past 10 years, if you are, for example, a front-end developer, you have worked with many different libraries, with many different frameworks. Some of them are not being used anymore. But the principles are the same from 20 years ago. We still talk about solid, clean code, or dry, single responsibility. We still talk about those things. But we have this natural tendency of trying to solve every single thing with something more on top. That leads to what is happening nowadays, where we are going back to the past. I'm not sure if you have noticed, but a long time ago, a group of people got together, and they created this thing of the Agile Manifesto. The Agile Manifesto was basically a set of principles. They wanted to make us faster and more, with cycles quite short and having a better interaction with our clients. That was the intention. What we have done is that we have built frameworks on top of it. We created processes, governance. We created committees. We created meetings over meetings to make sure that we are planning the work that we need to do. We have meetings to plan the plan of the work that we need to do. But now we have a solution for that. Instead of calling them meetings, let's do something different. Let's call them ceremonies, because that way it's different. But in fact, it's just the same thing. And that happened because at some point, we forgot about the principles. We look into the frameworks, and they are so more attractive than the principle. Because the principle is not easy. A principle is something that forces you to think, to design, to have an idea, to challenge yourself, to find a way to apply that principle in your day-to-day. A framework is so familiar. It's just, let's apply it. Simple. No, it's not simple. It's easy. What if we try to do it the other way around? What if we try to challenge it? That's exactly what 37 Signals has done. 37 Signals went through this process of what is Agile and why it's not working for us, and they tried to focus on the mission and understand the clear reason why those things exist. They extracted what was valuable for them, removed all the rest, applied subtraction, and mastered a new process. The new process is this thing, the shape-up. Now that they master it, they take the next step that a master should take, teach others. So they talk about it openly. That doesn't mean that you need to pick shape-up and apply in your day-to-day. That's not the idea. That means that you need to try different things, understand the principles, and try to find the minimum valuable thing that you can do in your day-to-day, instead of trying to solve every single thing with meetings over meetings and predefined processes. The beauty of this thing of the simplicity, is that by the end, it's not just about technical elegance or the code becoming so more simple than it used to be. In the end, it's a business advantage. It's a competitive advantage. Because by the end, it will reduce your cost, it will increase your speed, and the number of people burning out will decrease. So the turnover will decrease. And that's another challenge that we have at the moment, seeing the specialists becoming specialists and leaving. And now we need to train again. We don't value those that are still there because we look into everyone like if they, do you know the stack? You can do it. But there's so much more on building software than that. So we can take this as an opportunity, as a business advantage to apply in our day-to-day. Does it mean that simple will mean simplistic? Something that is too obvious, that is not creative? No. There's this great story that I love that is by an Italian chef named Massimo Bottura. Massimo has another Michelin star restaurant, and there's one day they were serving the last dish of the day. So there's just one table waiting for the dessert. They had to serve 2 lemon tarts. And on that moment, his sous chef grabbed the plate where he dropped it in the floor. In a Michelin star restaurant, it's not acceptable to go back to the table and say, sorry, we don't have a dessert for you. So the sous chef was in panic. Okay, worst thing ever. What can I do? So on that moment, all of that stress, all of that anxiety, what leads to narrow thinking, okay? Not thinking properly about what is happening. But Massimo looked at it from a different point of view, with calm, with simplicity. He is a master of his craft, so he could see beauty on the simple thing that was on the floor. So he grabbed another set of plates. He deconstructed the good tart into those two plates. And on that day, he created his signature dish. And the name is exactly that one. Oops, I dropped the lemon tart. Not only he created his most remarkable dish, but a remarkable story. And story that inspires. And that could only happen because he accepted the fact that sometimes we need to focus, we need to be calm, we need to subtract and master our tools to take the best out of it. And I can't finish this keynote without talking about the most concerning subject at the moment, that is AI. We are all afraid of what might happen to our industry. We are all afraid that maybe one day software development won't be a thing. Maybe you are looking at this talk with trying to challenge the idea of why do I care about simplicity if AI can make all of that complexity readable for me? That's fair. However, what AI is doing nowadays is basically accelerating the rate of growth of complexity. We are creating even more complexity, and we are doing it faster. So we need to do something about it. And it's our job as developers, as humans, to bring simplicity in place, to reason about what is happening, to think about what is being implemented. Simplicity is still our mission. While we would love to have AI doing every single thing for us, that's still our role. This is how you use the 3 pillars: focus, subtraction, and mastery. You focus on what matters. You focus on what is happening, and you read the signals. You discard the noise, remove the noise, subtract the noise. You accept that you can remove things to be better. You accept that sometimes the solution is not to add an extra Lego block, is to remove another block. And then you win space, the opportunity to master the things that you do in your day-to-day. That is extremely important because we are curious, we are builders. We love to build things with technology, so we need to have a purpose, something that excites us every single day to be better. And when you master a technology, it will feel great. We have so many generalists, we need more specialists. We need people that can talk about anything on that given database or language, and we look at them and we admire them. That's why maybe on the hallway you have seen some people that you know from the books or from articles, and you say, whoa, he's here. Because they are specialists on their craft. They are masters of their craft. And we need to accept that more often. Those were the 3 pillars that I applied to my life. I focused on my disease. I focused on my body. I was intentional on the choices that I had to take. I noticed the signals, what was going wrong, what was triggering the pain. And I tried to subtract all the things that were leading to that pain. But that was only possible because I invested in mastering my own disease, in understanding the disease, in reading about it, in studying about it, in going deep, besides of only trusting what the doctor told me. 10 years ago, I was on that room, being told that I couldn't play football anymore, and running was impossible. 10 years later, this year, I've run half marathon. How's that possible? Simplicity has this interesting aspect of making what seems impossible, possible. And that's what I want you to take with you today. I want you to ask yourself, what if this was simpler? What can I focus on? What can I subtract? What can I master? But don't do it because the code will become simpler. Do it to find the opportunity to do your best job and have a better life. Thank you. Obrigado.